Today's cross-examination was described as heated and intense, which coincidentally are the only two settings on Trump's tanning bed. Heated and intense. I'm going to go for 5 minutes intense, please.
All right, after 2 days of, yes, heated and intense testimony from Stormy Daniels, we're now finding out that the other star witness in Trump's New York hush money trial, Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen, says that he expects to testify next week. Here was Cohen yesterday talking about it.
I'm kind of looking forward to it because, again, can't be finished with something unless you start it, right? It's kind of like an entrepreneurial mindset. You can't be in it unless you're willing to get in it. And so there we go. You know, sooner this thing starts, the sooner this thing finishes. And that way I can, this too shall pass.
Joining me now is Michael Smerconish. He is the host of CNN Smerconish, also CNN political commentator, and our regular Friday guest. Michael, wonderful to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good morning, Casey.
So I honestly have been dying to know what you have thought of how this has all played out over the course of the last few days with Stormy Daniels on the stand and the details that have been brought in here, including the Trump lawyer's decision to put her on cross-examination in a way that dragged that out even more.
So my belief is that the prosecution is doing a fine job. They've absolutely convinced me that there was sex, and I accept her version. I believe that he was wearing the silk PJs and that he was not wearing something else that was significant. I also believe that he paid her so that the story would go away. I'm less certain, Casey, that they're establishing what they need relative to his motive. I mean, the evidence from my standpoint, and damn it, I wish we had cameras in that courtroom, but it's pretty thin as to whether the campaign was a substantial factor in his decision to make that payment as compared to protecting his family. Michael Cohen may be able to shed some light in that regard. I mean, I know there are going to be fireworks. Michael Cohen is a street fighter. I've been on his podcast on a number of occasions. He's sort of a quintessential New Yorker, and I mean that with affinity. But if this is the reaction to the Stormy Daniels testimony, buckle up for next week, because if that's when he testifies, and I don't know what else they have except Michael Cohen, I think it's going to be very, very significant. But let's not lose ourselves in the salacious. Let's stay focused on whether they are ticking all the boxes that they need to meet the motive burden.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think that they need to do, Michael, to convince the jury that it was election related? Because I will say we are so far removed in time from when this happened that I do see how it's possible to confuse it. But when you are, and having covered these presidential campaigns, it is not possible to overstate that in the weeks, and these are the very weeks leading up to the presidential election, if you are a candidate for president, the only thing you are thinking about and doing is trying to win. These campaigns are all consuming for these people who are running them. And the idea that it would be disconnected from that is frankly implausible to me as a campaign reporter. But that said, the jury has to be taken back to that period of time. And I'm not totally convinced they've been back there yet.
And what you've just laid out, I think, is a very plausible prosecution narrative. Like, you think it was a coincidence that it happened in the 11th hour of the campaign? The payment got made as the clock was about to strike 12. The other response, though, is to say, the pushback on that is to say, well, that's when she came forward because the iron was hot after the Access Hollywood tape. In other words, it really wasn't, the timeline really wasn't established so much by the election as it was the reemergence by Stormy Daniels. Something else that I want to say, I've heard so many observers, pundits on CNN and elsewhere saying that this was, Donald Trump is an incorrigible client, and that yesterday perhaps they went on too long with the cross-examination, and that was at his behest, no doubt. And I believe that. But I think there's more to it, and that is that Trump is playing to an audience beyond those 12 jurors. Thus far, none of this has hurt him, and it looks increasingly likely because of what happened with Judge Aileen Cannon, because we're waiting on the Supreme Court relative to the January 6th case. It looks, and the Georgia Fulton County case is still, slogging along because of the relationship between Nathan Wade and Fani Willis. It looks like this is the only one. And Trump, I think, is mindful of that. Rick Scott, the audio that you played, which is really interesting, is further proof of what I'm saying, that he's trying to convince the American electorate that this is all political. It is about the sex, as tawdry as it is, and it's very little about a campaign finance violation.
Yeah, it's interesting that you raised that, and let's just play a little bit of, because my sort of bigger picture question is the degree to which this is breaking through with Americans. But this was Jon Stewart last night on media coverage, saturation coverage, shall we say, of this trial.
It has been another big week of wall-to-wall, non-stop, penis-to-penis coverage. Ubiquitous coverage is numbing, fading into televised wallpaper with insight that only occasionally crackles through, such as...
He greeted her at his hotel room in satin or silk pajamas.
Which? Both are smooth materials, but satin or which? I need to know.
Our thanks to the Daily Show producers for being CNN This Morning viewers. Michael, is it breaking through? Is this something Americans are actually talking about, focusing on, or is it all just noise in an incredibly noisy political environment?
I assure you, to the extent there are still water coolers in offices and people still go to offices, this is what people are talking about. I hear the same criticism that you just heard from Jon Stewart. I'll get telephone calls on the radio today. Why are you talking about this again? How could I not be talking about this? It's got all the elements, and it's a former president, and he's the Republican standard bearer. Is it breaking through? I think people are interested. Whether they're having their minds changed because of this trial, I seriously doubt. I don't think it's moving the needle at all in that regard. People are seeing in it what they want to see in it.
Yeah. All right, Michael Smerconish, always grateful to have you on Fridays.
You too.
Thank you for being here. And to all of you watching, make sure to watch his show tomorrow morning on CNN at 9 a.m. All right, panel.